I really don't think it's going to help your team. In fact, it's probably going to negatively impact your team. If you're using a top priority on these guys or you're spending fab, I think you're going to massively regret it. This is a very important week for the waiver wire, but maybe not for the reasons that you think. I think a lot of people could really mess up this week. I'm here to help you get it right. In this video, I'm going to cover ads in smaller formats, larger formats, defensive streamers for week 9, and also Fool's Gold. I think there is a ton of Fool's Gold this week. Don't be fooled. Let's get this right. All right, starting off with ads for smaller formats, your 8 or 10 team formats. Names like Keon Coleman, who is starting to really develop, the rookie wide receiver for the Bills. Tyrone Tracy and Chase Brown both taking over the RB1 roles on their team. Bucky Irving is getting involved now that there's no Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. They are funneling everything through the running backs. Tucker Kraft looks like a league winner. Same with K. Doughton. And then Tua is a reliable starter. Again, these guys would be available in smaller formats. All right, moving on to your 12, 14 team traditional type of formats. Cedric Tillman is my #1 pickup in fantasy this week. To be honest, I think he's one of the only interesting names, one of the only guys that you really should be going out there and spending a significant portion of your fab on, and I'll tell you why. What else do we need to see at this point, right? #1, Amari Cooper was traded away. That's led to more snaps and more opportunities for a young, talented player in Cedric Tillman. #2, the quarterback changed, right? They went from Deshaun Watson, he who shall not be named, even though we named him, to Jameis Winston, who had 41 passing attempts his first week as a starting quarterback. 3, the offense is improving with Jameis Winston. In the first 7 weeks, they averaged under 16 points per game. First game without Watson with Winston, 29 points. I mean, that is a huge improvement. And #4, Tillman has been leading the way and producing. Last week, right, we had Cedric Tillman on this video series. You know that. And last week, he led all wide receivers on the team with targets with 11 and in target share with 24%. He was second amongst wide receivers in snaps and in routes run. This week, he was second amongst wide receivers in targets with 9, had the same target share though with 24%, 2 weeks in a row, 24% target share. That is beautiful, especially in a team that's going to let Jameis throw the ball all over the yard. And he was second amongst wide receivers in snaps and routes run. And he just keeps producing. How could they not continue to reward him with targets? Last week in week 7, 12 targets, turned it into 81 yards, over 18 fantasy points. This week's 9 targets, 2 touchdowns, almost 100 yards, and almost 30 fantasy points. With Jameis quarterbacking this team rest of the way, Tillman has special upside that I just don't think you're going to find again on the waiver wire this year. So I'm willing to go out. If he's available for some reason still in your leagues, go hoard. Okay, we're saying like 40+% type of hoard, because I don't know if you're going to have a player like this again on the waiver wire. Okay, second player, just in case he's out there, I don't want to spend too much time. The reason he could be out there in some leagues is because he was out this week with an injury. His team is on a bye week this upcoming week, and that might have led to some owners dropping him. That is Juwan Jennings. He has to be rostered in every single format. I don't care if he was just dropped and maybe he's dropped in this next cycle. You got to prioritize this name. Jennings was a needed wide receiver for the Niners for the first 4 weeks. What happened in the first 4 weeks? Well, Debo was dealing with an injury, and Ayuk was really rusty coming back from that holdout. In those first 4 weeks, 3 out of 4 games, over 11 fantasy points, and of course, his blow-up game versus the Rams in week 3, 3 touchdowns, over 46 fantasy points. Potential league winner if he's out there, over 30% of my fab. I mean, he has got to be rostered. We don't talk too much about him, though, because we already know that. Let's talk about a quarterback that we have featured on our stash video multiple weeks now. That is Bo Nix. If you're in a 1 quarterback league and you need a quarterback rest of the way, Bo Nix has special upside. This man is on fire. Coming into week 7, he was top 4 in rushing yards amongst quarterbacks. And after his rough start to his career, weeks 1 to 2, he has really started to impress. Let's look at weeks 1 to 2 versus weeks 3 to 8. Because you can see his touchdowns per game go from 0.5 almost to 2. His turnovers per game go from 2 to almost non-existent. And his fantasy points per game go from about 11 to over 21 per game. Of course, he just had his best career day versus the Carolina Panthers. A lot of people are doing that, but still impressive that he had the matchup against him and performed. And by the way, next week he faces the Baltimore Ravens. Who just faced the Ravens? Well, that was Jameis Winston and this, real mismatch team that's just kind of come together and thrown all over the yard on the Baltimore Ravens. You can throw on that team, and I would be totally fine using Bo Nix as a startable option depending on you know, matchups moving forward. All right, at number 4, Josh Downs. I don't want to spend too much time. We talked about him a lot, but if he is out there, he should be rostered. The talent is not the question for Josh. It's the quarterback play. If you look at his matchups in red, those are games where he played with Anthony Richardson. If you look at his matchups in yellow, those are games where Joe Flacco was a starting quarterback. And let me ask you guys, how long can this team afford to keep Anthony Richardson as their starting quarterback? This is a good team, guys. They are 500, 4-4, a competitive team. They could totally make the playoffs if they had competent quarterback play. Anthony Richardson this week completed 10 out of 32 passes. That is ridiculous. He actually had 2 completions in the entire first half. Guys, if this team ever moved on to Flacco, even if they just wanted to bench Anthony Richardson for a while and kind of the Bryce Young route, let him learn under a veteran, then Josh Downs would be an absolute league winner. You have to have him in your leagues. All right, at number 5, do you play in a Superflex league? Because this take is specifically for you. Jameis Winston is an absolute must-have in a Superflex league. We talked about him last week, but again, in case you missed out, absolute must-have. It's so difficult to find a starting quarterback off the waiver wire in a Superflex format. You'll know that if you play in that format. And in his first start as a Cleveland Brown, 41 passing attempts, 29 fantasy points, 3 passing touchdowns, over 300 passing yards. Absolute, like, unload the clip type of scenario here for a name like Jameis Winston. And then if you're looking for a cheap spot start at quarterback, that name would be Malik Willis, because we know Jordan Love is going to be dealing with this groin injury. We don't know how long that's going to last for him, but he is going to miss time, in my opinion. And Malik Willis will be a cheap spot start until that time ends. He started 2 games for this team in weeks 2 and 3. And in those games, he had 15 fantasy points and almost 28 in those weeks. And he faced a really good Tennessee Titans defense, by the way, which very few offenses are throwing on. Averaged over 55 rushing yards per game in those contests as well. So definitely someone that is worth rostering. Again, Jameis is worth unloading the clip on in Superflex for your fab. Malik is not worth loading the clip on. He's more like a 10% type of fab type of name. Add him if you need help as a spot start. All right, the 6th player we are adding right now, Slick Ricky Pearsall. You know, if he is for some reason available out there, he played really, really well, had 4 targets, also had a 40-yard rushing attempt, which was cool to see. I think his role will continue to grow over the course of time. Remember, this is a first-round rookie who was shot. He is slowly getting worked into a very, very good offense. All right, at number 7, let's talk about the other guys for the Cleveland Browns. By the way, if you know that movie, I mean, one of the funniest movies of all time. If you know, you know. But Elijah Moore had a pretty impressive day, right? 12 targets, which led the Cleveland Browns more than any player. Very, very impressive. Now, here's the cons with a name like Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is kind of discount Wan'Dale Robinson at this point. And what do I mean by that? I mean, he's not going to be a big play guy. He's probably not going to be a target in the red zone or even in the end zone. I mean, if you think about Elijah Moore over the past 3 years, he's averaged 1 receiving touchdown per year in the past 3 years. He's just not a big body, a name that you really think a team would ever target or prioritize for those touchdown opportunities. And that's, of course, just going to limit his upside on a weekly basis, but he could turn into a flexible name. At number 8, this is more of a deep dive, but Parker Washington and Xavier Hutchinson. For Parker Washington, Christian Kirk is ruled out for the season. He broke his collarbone, or fractured it is the technical term if you like. Gabe Davis also went down with an injury in this game, but Parker Washington led wide receivers in snaps and routes run, and he was tied with Christian Kirk for 4 targets. He is a name that I really loved coming out of Penn State. I think he slots right into that Christian Kirk role. He was a slot wide receiver at Penn State. He's kind of like this running back build, but in a slot wide receiver body. Has great hands. I think he could have a serious breakout. So this is more of a stash, but definitely a name that needs to be rostered. All right, we're going to talk about Fool's Gold here in a second, but I first want to get to defensive streamers for week 9. If you need to stream the position, I stream it every single week. Here are 4 matchups that I love. The Chargers at the Browns, the Titans versus the Patriots, who will be without Drake May, the Bengals versus the Raiders, and the Commanders at the Giants. That Commanders defense, man, I mean, they're turning it around slowly. Dan Quinn is cooking up something in the kitchen. All right, we are going to finish off with Fool's Gold. The following list of players, I personally think you should not waste a priority. I don't think you should waste fab on them, and I'll tell you why. Number 1 is Isaac Orindo. I think a lot of people are going to be talking about Isaac Orindo, and Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. I haven't seen the waiver wire videos for this week, but here's my issue against it. Love the player. In fact, we probably love him more than anyone out there. But the reality is, this team is going into a bye week, and Christian McCaffrey, there's a report that he has a very good chance to play in week 10. So what are you going to do? Waste your top priority or spend fab on Isaac Orindo not to play him this week when you need a win, and then maybe not to even have him next week because Jordan Mason's going to recover it or CMC might be back? It's just not going to work for me. How about Dearness Johnson? Well, ETN is going to be back very soon, and you can't even play Dearness Johnson right now anyway, unless a very specific game script is out there where the Jags are down and they can't run the ball and they have to have him as a passing option. But when ETN's back, Dearness Johnson is dust. He's irrelevant. Sean Tucker. All right, look, 3 running backs in the same backfield. No, thank you. That's as simple as it is. Michael Wilson, at the end of the day, in my opinion, in the Arizona Cardinals offense, there is only enough for 2 people to eat at this pie. That's Trey McBride and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. And the little scraps that get thrown on the floor, right? That's pretty much split between Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson. So every week you're going to be confused on which name was the right start. Tyler Conklin. Here's the reason I don't believe in Tyler Conklin. Back-to-back weeks with touchdowns, but I believe Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, those are the guys that they're going to want to get more and more involved in this passing attack over the next couple weeks. Mike Gesicki, again, I think this is fool's gold. When T. Higgins is back, Mike Gesicki is not going to be targeted the way he was without T. Higgins. I mean, we've already seen that this year with T. Higgins healthy. And also, we've seen Eric All, the rookie tight end, already kind of overtake Mike Gesicki as far as like snap percentages go. Mike Gesicki just played because they had no T. Higgins. So again, this is a huge list of names that I think you should not be prioritizing. I really don't think it's going to help your team. In fact, it's probably going to negatively impact your team. If you're using a top priority on these guys or you're spending fab, I think you're going to massively regret it. So I appreciate you guys watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. Last thing I'll say here is if you haven't signed up for a free account on Flock Fantasy, go get it. It's completely free. When you sign up with the promo code LAND, you're going to unlock expert consensus rankings, the My Team Analyzer, and of course a trade calculator. Again, all for free just by using the promo code LAND at sign up for a free account, flockfantasy.com/land. And you'll see in the pinned comment, you can ask me a question at any time on that website. I appreciate you for watching. Let's get it right. We can improve our teams, but sometimes patience is the best thing with the waiver wire, and I feel like this is one of those weeks unless one of those top names are available. All love. I'll see you in the next one. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.